Hi, I'm Liz Field. I'm the concertmaster of the Bach Festival Orchestra, and I'd like to invite you to come to our second Zimmerman CoffeeHouse concert. And I'm very excited because this is going to be in a brand new venue in Pater Hall at the Moravian College. And it's a very intimate space, I'm told, which actually will resemble a little bit more what it might have felt like to be in Zimmerman's CoffeeHouse. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Zimmerman's CoffeeHouse was a wonderful coffeehouse, basically, that was in Leipzig, and there were weekly concerts there. And in fact, this collegiate was started by Zimmerman and taken over by Bach. And every week, musicians, some of them itinerant musicians, sometimes wonderful students, would come and play their new compositions. It was always a very festive atmosphere, and there were high-styled Leipzigers who would come in to show off their fashions, and they would sit among the students and itinerant musicians and hear all these wonderful new compositions. The wonderful thing about this coffee house is that it was a very intimate affair. It was an event, and sometimes it's easy to forget that 18th century repertoire was always intended to be a live event. It was always something that was shared between the performers and the audience. There was never any such thing as disembodied music, so there was no way anybody could hear any of these pieces unless somebody came and played them for them. And this was one of the great things about Zimmerman's Coffeehouse, is that everybody was very excited to hear the new compositions. And I often get a sense that there was almost a communal teamwork kind of effect happening, where Bach was hearing new compositions coming in, or maybe he's hearing a Telemann piece that he hasn't heard, and the musicians themselves are listening and creating, and they're combining their efforts. So it really was a process, and you had to be there. So that's why I'm very excited about your being part of our event at the festival. It's going to be on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And we're going to play a wonderful Paris quartet by Telemann, actually. It's an E minor, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the favorite. It has Robin Canny joining us on Baroque flute. And then we're going to play another suite by Telemann with the fabulous gamba player, Molly Glaze. It's a combination of violin, strings, and gamba, and the gamba kind of comes in and out, being a soloist and joining in unison, and it's a really wonderful festive piece. We're also doing a few Vivaldi concertos. Of course, Bach revered Vivaldi really. In some ways, Vivaldi was his teacher, especially of concerto style, and that's how, as a young man, he learned to construct concertos. He actually copied Vivaldi's concertos note by note, and this was part of his learning process. So we always like to include a bit of Vivaldi in these events. I would like to emphasize again this idea that this is an event and that you, as the audience, will be part of it. And I think the Bethlehem Festival is unique. I sometimes tell people, oh yes, I do this festival up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and every year we play the B minor Mass. And people say, you play the B minor Mass every year? And I always say, oh no, you have to wait a whole year to hear it again. And that's the whole thing. There's no other place which champions so wonderfully what it feels like to be there in the hall with the chorus, with the musicians. And it cannot compare to hearing the B minor Mass over your car radio, or even sitting in your nice couch in your living room. It's about being there, and it is an event. And imagine in the 18th century, if you wanted to hear the B minor Mass, people had to sing it for you. And so everybody in Bethlehem has to wait a whole year to hear it again, and that's the way I like to think of it. And I'm always very excited to play it. And I have to say, I think I recognize a lot of you in the audience, and I might dare to say I sometimes might even guess I know some of your favorite movements. So you, as the audience, are really a big part of this. And it's even more so with the chamber music. And that's what's happening in the Zimmerman's Coffeehouse. This is really what happened in the 18th century, is that you came in and participated with this. The musicians would get feedback from you, not just by talking about it, while we're playing, you're sitting right there. And so you become a part of that event. And that's what this music is designed to do, is designed to communicate this incredible palette of human emotions and expressions. It's intended to delight and elate or horrify or whatever it is at the moment that it's being played. And I hope that you will come join us at this moment and share that event with us, because it's really fun. Now I'm going to say further, we're also playing this concert on period instruments. And for those of you who don't know what that is, I thought I have both of my violins, and I thought I would give you a little bit of a demonstration of what the difference is between a modern violin and a Baroque violin. Give a brief explanation of what this business is between period and modern instruments. Because in fact, I have to say it's a little bit confusing. Because first of all, here I have two violins. All right, one of these violins was made in 1703, and the other violin was made in 2007. So the trick question is, which is the Baroque one and which is the modern one? And so obviously, the surprising answer is that the modern one is this one, which was made in 1703. And here is the Baroque one, made in 2007 by Carl Dennis in Rhode Island, who's a fantastic luthier, especially of historic instruments. Now, so what on earth does this mean? Because in fact, the modern instrument really is a misnomer. It should really be called a modernized instrument. So this violin, when it was first made in 1703, resembled this one. Not just in the fact that it was brand new and shiny without a lot of scars and had all of its varnish, but its construction was quite different. I don't know if you can see this. If you zoom up, and this is a little technical, we have here on the Baroque violin what's called a wedged fingerboard. So the angle is made from this very slight wedge. And there's a straight neck that's just nailed into the body of the violin. And there's kind of a wide bridge. And you can see that it's strung with raw gut strings. And there's just a simple tailpiece, there's no chin rest, and there's no shoulder rest, because this violin was intended just to rest on the shoulder, on the collarbone this way. The bow, at that time, looked like this. This is a Baroque bow. And we call it a pike's head bow. It's just a plain stick. There's no camber. And simple, a very thin ribbon of hair. Now this instrument, when it's first, in its original construction, is very resonant. And actually this room I'm in is a wonderful acoustic for this, because what happens with an instrument like this is that the room itself becomes about half the instrument. And an interesting story about that is when I was at Cornell and I started to look through the library, one of the first books I pulled off of the shelf, I opened to a page and it was labeled tempo. And it said, how to determine the proper tempo. This is a translation from German. And the first thing that you consider when you're trying to determine the tempo in the 18th century, says this man, which I can't remember who it was because I just went to Cornell and forgot that I needed footnotes. Anyway, what he says is the first thing you consider is how many tapestries are on the wall. And when I first read that, I didn't go, what does that mean? And it turns out, of course, if there are a lot of tapestries on the wall, the acoustic is dead, you're going to have to play faster. So if there are no tapestries, you can play slower, or you must play slower because there's so much resonance. Okay, so here's my violin, which is actually a copy made in 2007 of a grand pattern Amati. And this violin probably looked like an Amati and was like this for about 100 years of its life. And then in the beginning of the 19th century, all the Amatis and the Stradivarius and the Guarneris and the Guadagninis, all the great instruments that you've heard about, underwent what I call open scroll surgery. And they were completely transformed. The necks were essentially removed. They were cut from here to here. And they were completely redesigned, and they put it in a much greater angle. The tops were taken off, they were regraduated with blocks of wood. The instrument basically had increase of pressure, so that the instrument, instead of just being resonant, now you could push the sound and project it into a larger space, which is what was beginning to happen in the 19th century, is that we needed instruments that could project, because now we were playing in more public halls. And to go along with that change, the bow also became redesigned. And this is the modern bow that you're all familiar with. And you can see it's quite different. There's a lot of camber. There's a hatchet head up here. There's a much greater ribbon of playing space. The hair is much wider. And in fact, one of the biggest inventions is this little silver thing on the bottom called a ferrule. And that spread the hair and allowed more hair. You can see the frog is heavier. So it's heavier and allows the sound to be a lot louder. And here it's very loud. But what you find with this, it came at a price. So in order to get that projection, we lost a lot of the original resonance that was in the original instrument. And what it turns out is when you study the music that was written for the instruments as they originally were built, the music sounds and feels and speaks to us in a very different way. The notes on the page look very similar, but you start to understand the language of what they really mean and how they relate to way not just the instrument, but the room and the syntax of that notation is quite different. So one of the pieces I'm going to play actually on the Zimmerman CoffeeHouse is a very famous piece that if anybody has studied the violin or if any of your children have played the violin, you will recognize. And I, of course, studied that as a child, as we all did. I am going to play that same concerto on my reconstructed Amati violin with all my resonance and my little bow, and I discovered that there's all sorts of different possibilities about how this might have actually sounded when Vivaldi wrote it. And I have the idea that it might have actually sounded something like this. And hear the rest of that phrase. It's on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. in Pater Hall, Moravian College. And there will be more information on the website, bach.org. And please join us for the whole festival. And please come and hear it. You can't wait to hear the B minor Mass. It's great. Thank you.